Something's got a hold on me lately.
Hey, we're back on The Reckoning. Ryan Haidt here, and we've got a very big treat upcoming. The next few minutes, we are joined by Mr. Josiah Lippincott. If you're not familiar with him, get familiar. He's an author, a writer, a political scientist, and a Marine veteran. You find him over on X at @JLippincott_. Don't forget the underscore. Put it in the right place at @JLippincott_, or over on Substack, lippincott.substack.com. You'll find him there under the name Regime Critic. This is a big one. I'm excited to tear this one apart. Josiah, thanks for being back with me. How are you?
Ryan, I'm doing awesome. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm always glad to talk to you because there are big, important things to talk about, and there's a lot of big, bold things to be said and done. This is what you're picking up. I saw the last one just a few days ago here over on your Substack. Repeal Hart-Celler, which of course you're referring to the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965. This is the big Band-Aid that I think is the next big Band-Aid to rip off for the America First movement. It is not just about, let me say it this way. The conversation ought not just to be about shutting down the border and stopping illegal immigration. We need to have a serious discussion about mass legal immigration and how we do this as a nation as a whole, because the left and a lot of the neocons are very fond of reminding us, oh, we're a nation of immigrants. And I think there's a big crowd saying, wait a minute, no, we're not. We are a nation of settlers, and we need to look very seriously at our legal immigration policy in the United States right now. And we've got just a golden opportunity in this upcoming golden age to do that. Why don't you give me, what's the premise of what you're laying down here in this latest article?
Yeah, it's the radical transformation of the character of the American Republic that was implemented by law. And, just the numbers are staggering. And we haven't had recent updates in maybe 5 to 10 years, but there are at least 80 million people in America today who are either immigrants themselves from after 1965 or the children of those immigrants. So a huge portion of our population comes from this radical shift in American law that occurred in the 1960s, in which we switched from primarily taking in immigrants from Europe to taking in immigrants from all over the world. And so 90% of our migrants after 1965 have come from the third world. And they've come from countries that don't have a history of liberty. They don't have a history of Western civilization. And overwhelmingly, this population of migrants that's come to the United States and been naturalized overwhelmingly favors the American left. They overwhelmingly favor what I and Tucker Carlson call gay race communism. They're devoted to these principles of spreading gay rights abroad, anti-racism, which really means inflaming racial tensions, portraying whites as fundamentally evil, which I think is a terrible thing, an ideology to embrace. And then finally, embracing, wide sweeping government control over every aspect of our lives. If you want to look at the decline in American life, look at the empowerment of the left and the way it's connected to immigration. Immigration is fundamentally political. Any conversation about the economy, any conversation about, labor this, labor that, talk about the regime. Who are we as a people? And what is the purpose for which our government was created? And right now, immigration is eroding our traditional way of life, and it needs to change. And that begins with repealing Hart-Celler.
Now, I'll ask you this, because again, this is something near and dear to my heart, because, my old boss, Phyllis Schlafly, was one of the first voices I heard starting to really harp on this several years ago, saying, hey, folks, this isn't just illegal immigration. Yes, we are against illegal immigration. We want better border security. However, we also need to understand how mass legal immigration, and one of the big things she pulled out, there's a white paper in 2014, her folks over at Eagle Forum produced at that time, how mass legal immigration is dooming a conservative Republican Party. She was connecting the dots, not just culturally, but electorally, how this was being used to just fundamentally transform the United States. We've got Barack Obama's favorite phrase. She was very fond of reminding people what he meant by that. This is one of them. We have had a system of mass legal immigration into America that is fundamentally incompatible with our American identity. And frankly, that's something that the left has fought against for a while. Oh, this American identity. No. It's always about diversity and about multiculturalism. It's never about our unique American identity. I'm really sensing a return to that idea in a very new way under this America First movement. Are you seeing the same thing? Do you think this is something that there's going to be a a will for, not just with the people, but in the Trump administration to address this issue?
Absolutely, because the problems caused by our immigration policy are not going away. We are an increasingly divided nation, and that division stems from the fact that you have foreigners here who despise America. They feel like they're owed something when they come here. And a lot of that stems from the attitude of our post-1965 immigration order. One of the things that's really striking about the way the framers of that policy articulated what they wanted was they oriented our immigration policy to what was good for the foreigner. So there's a 1952 report called Whom Shall We Welcome that was authorized by President Truman. And there it calls for immigration from the third world because the United States, quote, had not yet fulfilled its duties to suffering humanity, unquote. So suffering humanity, i.e. everyone else all over the world, has a right that supersedes the good of the American people. At no point was this policy of mass legal migration from the third world ever framed as something that was good for Americans. And what we have seen since then is that mass migration has been a tool of the radical left to attack our way of life. There's so many people will say, oh, the problem is democracy. For the left, that's what they believe. They didn't like the democratic results of American elections. They didn't like the way Americans were voting. And so they decided to switch out the demos, to switch out the people. The Democratic Party decided to elect a new population as part of the American regime. And that's a huge problem. It's totally inimical to our principles of the consent of the government, of the consent of the governed, and the defense of American rights. And so right now, the Trump administration, the MAGA movement more broadly, has no choice but to face full on, head on, this question of who are we as a nation and why are we here? What are we trying to do? What does the government exist to do? And that just means getting to the heart of these political questions. And the moment is ripe right now.
Indeed, I believe it is. Let me ask you this, because we're seeing a lot of, discussion. This is, we're kind of, ripping the Band-Aid off, for lack of a better analogy. We're starting to rip the Band-Aid off of some of the citizenship questions when it comes to our census, when it comes to the status of citizenship, but not just counting who is and isn't a citizen, but how we define who that is. I've started to really dive into the, does an American citizen, let me say it this way, does a citizen an American make? Is it one and the same or not? I think that's a question a lot of people are starting to answer is, well, wait a minute, hold on. Just because you've obtained citizenship, does that mean you understand the fundamental values that built this country? That, the founding fathers were off to remind us this Constitution is a vehicle with which, we can govern, but it does not protect self-governance. That requires a moral and upright and religious people. That directly from John Adams. A moral and religious people are required. Otherwise, what we're building here won't last. As the Trump administration looks forward, I've seen a lot of discussion now about, hey, we need to talk about a few things. H-1B visa program, that's one thing. I'm hearing a lot of good, this has long been a flashpoint between a lot of hardline, immigration advocates and tech companies. I think this is one of the big reasons we saw a fallout, particularly with Vivek and with Elon Musk. But I'm seeing them talk about the citizenship question. Currently, there are only, I think Trump expanded this in his first term. Is it correct? Do you know the citizenship test was expanded? It requires 12 correct answers out of a 20 question version. Is that it for our citizenship test?
I haven't looked at the most recent data, but I can tell you it's a joke. If all these people who are coming here, if all these naturalized citizens know English and know so much about the American way of life, why are we printing ballots in other languages?
Yeah.
How does that work? I thought you understood what it meant to be an American. That starts with being able to speak our common language. How can you have a political community with someone who doesn't speak your language, who doesn't know what you have to say? And I don't think you can. And, moreover, you mentioned Vivek and Elon.
Right, yeah.
One of the issues here, and I really want to drive this point home. One of the arguments the pro-migration faction will say, oh, well, we need immigrants for the economy. Labor is an input into the economy. We need to have these people here that can produce more, that creates more goods. Everybody benefits. Americans are wealthier, all that stuff. Here's the thing. Let's take all of that as true. Why then do these economic migrants need to have access to American citizenship? Why is it that their kids get to become Americans? If they're just here to seek a better life and to work, why do they need to stay? Why can't they just go back when they're done? Why do they get to bring all of their relatives? I want someone to explain that to me. I want one of these economists to explain to me why it is economic migrants need to have access to our political regime. And so my response there is to say, it's never been about the economy. It's not about money. It's not about economic growth. It is about power and political control. The entire purpose of all of these programs is to benefit the Democratic Party and the radical left. It is to import radical socialists like Omar Fatah in Minneapolis and Zohran Mamdani in New York City. They are communists. They are Marxists. They are enemies of the American way of life. When you see the Mexican flag being flown by rioters in places like Los Angeles, you can see, without needing to see a single graph or number, you can see the failure of the American immigration policy right there. These foreigners should not be here swearing allegiance to foreign powers. That is not the way to have a functioning, free country.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's the key is, I mean, we've had this discussion. We're not an economic zone. We're a nation with an identity, with a people, with a culture. And the more that is eroded, the farther down into oblivion we roll. What's your take on Vivek out in Ohio? It seems like he's far and away probably the clear front runner at this point for not just the Republican primary, but for the governor's seat. Do you think there's still a big question mark with him? Because that was really over the H-1B visa and over American culture. That's where he seemed to really fall out of favor in the America First crowd. Is this kind of a conciliatory prize? You go away from the national level and we'll support you for Ohio governor. Is he going to be a liability there for us in this, or do you think that'll kind of temper him down a little bit?
Yeah, so I really went to war with Vivek over Christmas 2024, just on this fight over the H-1B visa thing. The good thing about being Ohio governor, assuming he wins, is that he won't have control over immigration policy at the federal level from that position. So the danger he poses from that role is that he will push for these policies down the line. It's just a continuation of this refusal to confront the fundamental problem. And I think Vivek, for obvious reasons, is really hesitant to have that conversation about, how good is it to have widespread Indian immigration to the United States? And the easiest test for you as an American, have you assimilated, is the question of, can you honestly confront the problems that were present in your home country that caused you to leave and come to the United States? And do you have respect for the American people and the nation they built? If you're so awesome and your talents are just so great, why couldn't you cultivate them in your home country? What were the problems that caused you to come here to a predominantly white America, to white country, Protestant, all this? What was that? And are you willing to say it's because the American people were simply better at creating the conditions of liberty? And I have not yet seen Vivek be willing to say that and confront honestly the problems in India and the problems with overarching, overall Indian migration to the United States. He has not ever shown a willingness to be able to be honest about that policy. So I don't trust him on the immigration issue. But this gets into a sort of deeper question, which is, where are the hard-hitting, thoughtful America First candidates that can articulate a message of prosperity for the American people while also defending our way of life? Those two things are inextricable. And, I see that line, America isn't just an economic zone. But I want to point out, our regime constantly goes to war with the ability of Americans to make money and have prosperity here in our own country that we fought and bled and died for, that our ancestors carved out of a wilderness. You have government bureaucrats dictating how much water is in your toilet bowl. That you have government bureaucrats dictating what kind of, chemical you can put inside of your air conditioning unit. Every aspect of your life is being regulated and micromanaged from Washington, D.C. And it is absolutely destructive of our way of life. The Declaration of Independence talks about how the King of England sent out these agents to eat out the wealth of the American people, to eat up the wealth of the American people. And that's what's happening now from Washington, D.C. And so What we need are strong America First candidates who aren't just grifting, who aren't just trying to make their way in the world and buy their way into office so they can feel honor. What we need are patriots who are dedicated to making life better for the American people, who are true patriots, who just love this country. They want the common good to be secured, who want there to be a future for their children, who see beyond just quarterly profits, to see just beyond, oh, these migrants, they provide so much labor. Well, what if they lead the communist revolution? What about that? We need far-reaching long-term aims, and that there's no replacement. There's no alternative to having young leaders with fire and energy who are devoted to making this country a better place. If we're tired of grifters like Vivek, then we need to provide better candidates to go out there and win. And at the end of the day, that drive and will is exactly what matters.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Man, you're knocking on one of my favorites out of that long list of grievances that they had against the king. He's sent forth, erected new offices and sent forth swarms of his agents to eat out our people's substance. If that doesn't describe the administrative state we have now, I don't know what else does. Hey, I got a couple of questions on different things I want to get to. Josiah, can you hang with me through a break and give me a few more?
Yeah.
All right, folks, we'll be right back. Josiah Lippincott on the line at @JLippincott_ on X, regime critic on Substack. We'll be right back with him for a little more culture on the other side of the break. Hey, we're back on The Reckoning. Ryan Haidt here, and we're coming one more segment left this hour. I've still got Mr. Josiah Lippincott on the line with me. We're digging into America's identity, our culture wars, which, by the way, we used to have culture wars, we thought. Now we're in the heat of them big time. And a lot of conversations over American identity, immigration policy, legal and illegal, mostly legal, we're covering here. But back to it again, Josiah Lippincott on Substack under regime critic at @JLippincott_ on X. Josiah, let me ask you this, because we talk about these big broad things that are happening culturally, the move that direction. I can kind of look at the Trump administration, at the America First agenda, particularly Stephen Miller and a lot of folks inside, and see the progression they're going. Here's my question though: where the rest of American culture is moving with them, or if they're moving with them, because we're seeing a big shift of young men, particularly on the on the political spectrum, moving to the right. But we have a few test moments here. One of them, and I have to bring this up, I mentioned it this week. I didn't even think I'd be talking to you about American Eagle ads, and yet here I am asking you about American Eagle ads. Of course, we've kind of made this progression. If you haven't seen it this week, the big Sydney Sweeney, who I don't know, maybe she's a model or something. I have no idea who she is. But we are back to the advertisements of my youth, because for years we've had not, maybe over the top, glamorized, way over the top sexual advertising with fit models and athletic people. The last several years, we've drifted into this multicultural DEI agenda, body positivity movement. And what was claimed to us, we always have this progression. The left says, oh, that's not happening. And then they'll say, oh, it's happening, but it's not, impactful. It's very rare. We're full blown in that was happening, and it's a good thing, because as this new ad comes out, I'm seeing, video after video after video of very interesting characters online talking about, oh my gosh, American Eagle used a skinny white lady with blonde hair and blue eyes. This is Nazi propaganda. We have to cancel them. Yeah. We got to cancel it. Black influencers online saying, where are the good white people? We can't have this anymore. And I thought, is anyone going to fall for this anymore? Or have we maybe reached a point in society where a lot of people look and say, you guys are nuts? Because, the Democrats always, complain, the left complains, oh, we're not here. They deny all of the agenda you just accused them of in the last segment. They always deny it. And now we're having another opportunity, whether this lasts or not, to see the culture shift. I've just got a couple minutes left in the show. What do you think about this? Is there a real culture opportunity to move forward, to call the left on their nonsense, or are people just going to drift away?
Absolutely. No, the cultural shift is emerging just because in the aftermath of COVID, there was so much distaste with authority and a feeling among a lot of young Americans, especially, that their life was being stolen from them by the establishment and by the mainstream consensus. And especially with the freeing up of social media, which Elon did, and which I am grateful for, despite the falling out with Trump and all of that drama. And that has really created an opportunity for a new wave of content creators, quote unquote, who are conservative and are tapping into this disgust with the American establishment. And you're seeing that in these cultural venues. Just the fact that someone like Sydney Sweeney is being the front woman of this gene company, and that they're, talking about the fact that she's got good genes, they're punning on that. It's a sign that beauty and health are being celebrated again. We're not just this, we're not the degenerate freakazoid years of 2020 to 2024. Mm-hmm. Americans want to move on. They want to see beauty and strength and health honored, not deprecated. And, I think another aspect of the culture that you're seeing on this front is in comedy. That Stephen Colbert just got fired, I think by Paramount. But it's because he's not funny. If you're on TikTok or Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts, and I don't know how old your audience is or if they're on these platforms, but one of the things I see just when I'm there is that someone like Colbert, these mainstream shows are never, ever being shared online. They're never going viral. No one cares what they have to say. Yeah. Meanwhile, you have this comedy show like Kill Tony out of Boston, and they're just doing great.
Yep.
And it shows the populist wave is here to stay in both humor and in advertising.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. Glad to hear it all around. Thank you, Josiah, for your opinion. We always appreciate it. We'll talk again soon.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Thanks so much for hanging out with us today. Man, it's a full 2 hours. We try to pack it in here, but I will be back tomorrow. 4 o'clock, we'll be back for another installment of The Reckoning. Stick around here on the Real Talk Radio. Until then, have a good night, everybody.
To be living here today.